guess everyone can see better today, right? Okay. Well, for those, who hasn't been here already? So a couple of folks are new. Who's new? Who's been part of the process? Okay, so it might be a couple of people. Okay, I'm Ian Lockwood with Blue Design Group, and Anna and I have been working over the last couple of days on your area. And so today we're going to share with you what we came up with. But I want to start by thanking Andy and Candace for setting this up and making us comfortable and challenging us to meet with folks and listen. And for all of you who have come out to all the meetings, thank you very much. It's really hard to draw anything unless you know what people are thinking, what their values are, and what's concerning them. So I hope that we've captured some of what you told us in these drawings. Just keep in mind that these are just ideas to start with. And they're just ideas based on urban design principles. We are not familiar with the codes and the rules and all the sorts of other things that need to be taken into account. We're also not familiar with where all the property lines are, so we may be stepping on the odd toe here and there. That was unintentional. But what I'm hoping is just to share with you some vocabulary and approach so that you can take these ideas and keep moving forwards with them. When we got here, there was a lot of conflict and distrust and so on, and I hope this is a kind of a healing process a little bit where if we can get behind some ideas together, we can actually get something done. I can't remember how many times we talked about it over the last few days about helping shape the planning, because then you get your vision reflected in the future, as opposed to not getting involved, where things happen and you need to keep having to fight what's going on. Oops. So it's always nice to just support than to react to something. So, and the other thing, when we met, a whole bunch of issues came up, and I explained some of the theories to a few of you. So we kept a record of all of those discussions, and so we took the key ones and we're going to summarize them as well. So it's a bit of stuff at the beginning, so that when we get to the ideas about the actual context, it makes sense. Oh, this is the process. So we had a tour. We looked at your streets, some of your neighborhoods. We visited your roundabout. Awful lot of signs. Just noticed that now. Yeah, that's right. There's people who want to walk, or we saw some cyclists. There's plenty of development coming, so there's a lot of pressure on the area, so now it's a good time to get ahead of that. We had lots and lots of meetings. There was no shortage of input, and we went late into the night talking to people. So we rolled out the trace paper, we drew stuff, and we finally, someone had to make a decision. So whatever the baby drew on, that's what we chose. So basically, it's what we heard. Folks are very concerned about adjacencies, that is compatible with their homes and so forth. The scale, they're most concerned about the scale. Green space is very important to folks. A lot of people said we want places to walk. We enjoy walking. We want to be able to walk. So we're going to talk a little bit about walkability. Parks, particularly as this place intensifies, there has to be some parks somewhere. So we heard that. Places to meet, public places where you can socialize, meet, do things, celebrations, all that sort of thing. The image of the place is very important to everybody. And then particularly in the neighborhood, I can't remember all the names of the streets, but this particular street that there's potential cut-through traffic, Silver Spring. So we take a look at that as well. So we had this slide last time. You remember how development's kind of coming to the area. And just for some reflection, these are some old aerials that we looked at. This was 1940. And you can see this the airport, but there's not a lot else. This is all farmland. This was 1960. Still not much change. A couple of little developments, but not really a lot of development. The highway coming in, and then boom, 2010. Lots of first generation development on what were the farms. We did a little quick X-ray, and very sparse. What jumps off the screen is it's just a very sparse street network, and we'll get into that more in a minute. And this is the other site, again in 1940. These are just the old farm American roads, not any development, just farmers and fields. And then in the 60s, you see the highway comes through, and then boom, 2010. Another set of first generation development with a few greenfields still left to fill in. So again, a very sparse network, and we're going to focus a lot on this particular network because it's probably the more challenging of the two. And just for scale, we talked about connectivity, so we tried to pick a place that you might be familiar with. This is Plymouth, and it just shows the connected network. So you can kind of contrast it, with here. Of course, completely different context, but it just shows you what a connected network looks like compared to a sparse network. And then this is just review. Remember we talked about the streets are just not for moving cars, they're for, like you told us, creating identity, social spaces, recreation, multiple modes to create great addresses for housing, and places to grow your businesses. So streets have lots of roles. You recall we contrasted these two networks, and of course if there's a collision here, the whole thing shuts down. Very car dependent. Nobody walks in the city. Everybody walks in that city.
Even the one on the left, those white squares and rectangles are parks, correct?
Yeah, these are squares and parks, and so there's you're always within a fairly close proximity of a park or a place to meet. So that's something that you express, and you'll see this reflected in what we drew. So this is Savannah. It's very famous for its squares. And then we talked about the scale of streets and having many streets do the lifting as opposed to putting all the load on just a couple of streets. It's a lot easier to cross several little streets than one big street, which creates a barrier. And we also talked about how street networks inform land uses, the scale of land uses. When the blocks are huge, you tend to get sort of big blocks, big scale type development, and as they get smaller, you get more human scale development, which is, I think, in keeping with your vision for the future. And then as you assign trips to the network, when all the trips have to use one road, it tends to default to be automobile oriented. You get lots of routing options. You can go multiple ways, spreading loads out. Also, these tend to be also conducive to walking, so you actually have some choices. If something's within walking distance, you can walk there. This is a little rule of thumb that a number of us talked about, having light facing light. So single-family homes should, across the street, face single-family homes. Townhomes should face townhomes. And retail should face retail. And it kind of makes a nice street when things match on both sides. The exception is open space, so anything can kind of face a square or a park. We always like to have a street between the private uses and the public open space because it keeps it public. There is a bit of sometimes there's an issue with a one-sided retail street. Retail streets tend to do well with both sides. But basically any land use can face open space. And this is what we want to avoid, is to change land use across the street. Land use is often changed in the backyard. So, for example, you can have townhomes behind retail or single-family homes behind townhomes, and so forth. So if you you're changing scale or use, it's the backyards that you want to change. So this is about network. So pretend there's 500 homes in this development, and they have one street, like a grapevine, and all the houses have driveways on the street, and they all have to use the one street. Typically, a house generates one trip per peak hour. So in the afternoon, rush hour, let's say there's 500 trips being generated in this neighborhood, just for fun. So at the driveway coming in, there's 500 trips. And at the other end of the street, at the very tip of the cul-de-sac, there's 0 trips, and halfway there's 250, so the traffic volumes build up as you get to the entrances. Does that make sense, everybody? So what would happen if we just connected the cul-de-sac to this entrance here? Well, now there's like a kind of continental divide, so the traffic goes like that. So now the average has gone from 250 trips on that street to 125. So the actual traffic volumes have been cut in half because of this connection. Now, if we made another connection, now the traffic volumes are a quarter of what they were. Same number of trips, same number of houses, 1/4 of the traffic. So if you have a kid and your child wants to visit their friend, you're much more likely to let them walk with a quarter of the traffic than before. It's a much more friendly environment for walking. And if you connect it again, now you have 1/8 of the traffic, and eventually you get down to a network where there's not a lot of traffic because it's all being shared by all these streets. There's still 500 trips and there's still 500 homes, but the sharing of the loads is very walkable. So it's no coincidence that some of the most walkable places in the United States have the most little streets. But nobody actually builds it like this. You know, there's kind of hybrids. So your place is unique and it's got constraints and so forth. We strive for connectivity, but we have to respect the context we're given. So that's kind of the motivation. About scale, this is Leonardo da Vinci's picture about scale. And historically, everything about cities were designed around the human being. Today, we design around the car. And I think that we're hearing that we want to sort of go back a little bit and think it's a human scale in here. Still accommodate the car, but for people to walk and that kind of thing. So these are a little few exercises so that when you look at the network, you can kind of recognize these things. So let's say these buildings are all the same except there's one special building that maybe is a church or a civic building or something that you want to stand out. Which site would you buy if you're going to build that building? Would you want to be on A, B, or C? Which is the most prominent site, you think? C, yeah, because you can actually see the building right from both ways. So these two are almost invisible. This you can see. So by just a little bend in the street network, you can actually create a view. And you said you want cool views of vistas. So keep in mind this sort of thing. What's at the end of a view? So let's say, it doesn't matter where this is, but let's say there's buildings on every block. Where's the most important building? Yeah, right here. Of course it is. So you don't have to know where it is or what the buildings are or the land uses. We all know that that's the most important building. So the street network can create identity and value. This is more valuable than here because of the street network. You don't even have to know this. You don't have to know anything else. You can just look at the cartoon and tell. Now let's say this was a park. Now where are the most important buildings? Yeah, around the park. So that's why, in New York, for example, the most valuable property is around the park. Same here. Now, let's say a powerful developer came along and said, I really want to be in your community, and I just don't have enough space on these blocks. I want to take out this street and put in a big development. Look at all the streets you have. You don't need all those streets. I just need this little street. Is that a good idea to get rid of that street? No, it's not, because what happens is everything up to to the top right has now lost its relationship to the important place. And so streets can create relationships, important relationships between, in this case, parks and people that are in the center of town. So when we look at the network later, look at the relationships and what we're trying to create. So here's let's say this is a linear park in some city, and you can choose either one of these locations. So which is more prominent if you wanted to build a cool building? Actually, this is a trick question, they're equally prominent. But let's say now there are one-way streets. This one goes this way, this one goes that way. Now which one's more prominent? A is, yeah, so again, it's, depending what's going on, you can create value. Okay, here are 3 block structures, and this is what we call the amenity. So in this case, it happens to be a waterfront with a park. Let's look at B and C to start with. So pretend that these blocks are absolutely identical, and the only difference is that this has a street along the amenity, and this one has private development along the amenity. Which one do you think is in the public interest? Yeah, clearly B, because what happens is these folks will try to, they'll have a unnaturally high sense of territory over the public space. Also, you don't know which is the front. You know, they'll want to front the amenity, but this is the public street, so you're going to get some confusion about, you know, where does the dumpsters go, where's the parking and that kind of thing. So there's some confusion here. Here, the fronts all want to be here based on natural surveillance. This is public, you can use it, and these folks, they still have a territory, but they don't have like a real strong sense of, you know, total ownership where they want to filter what's going on and everything. So this is public. So now let's compare A and B. The blocks are identical, except in this case the short dimension is against the amenity. In this case the long dimension of the block is against the amenity. Which one adds the most value to the city? A, that's right. A, because the relationship to the amenity is pulled up all these streets, and you want connections to the amenity. There's twice as much relationship with the amenity here than with here. Now, some folks will argue that you can get, you know, one more building or one more house or whatever is being built here, but those 2 homes don't have enough value to replace the value of an entire street with the lakefront. So yeah, that's way more valuable. So instead of a linear amenity like a waterfront, let's say it's a park where you're kind of wrapped around the amenity. So which park? Oh, you already know the question. It's like Jeopardy, right? Yeah. A's the answer. What's the question? Okay, which is more valuable? Yeah. So yeah, obviously the value is pulled down every street. You know, the homes overlook it, but there's not a natural level of ownership. And this has no surveillance, so you know it's kind of creepy back here, typically. So that's the kind of public space we like to do. Anybody can tell where the railway tracks are? Yeah, clearly they're right there, right? Now let's say there's an amenity down here, whether it's a town center or a lake or whatever. Which side of the tracks has more value? Now this side, because all the streets, all that relationship, all that value has been severed by this block. Now let's pretend it's not a railroad track. Let's say it's a strip mall. You know, it doesn't matter what it is. If the streets get severed, that relationship gets severed, and that's really important, particularly here where you have some long blocks here and there. Now, I showed this to some of you at the meetings. Your area is filled with these what we call confluences, and these are kind of like errors in the street network that were done, you know, by accident when the place was first laid out. And they only really become an issue as places grow. You know, when they're new, it's not usually a problem. So this is a cartoon of a city that was built on a ridge line. It's a long city. There's 3 east-west streets, and I only showed 3 north and south streets, but for the sake of the drawing, there's really dozens of them. Looks like a ladder. And 2 of them crisscross right here. And all the streets are 4 lanes, and the city thought they had 12 lanes east-west. But here is a traffic signal, and only one of the streets can have a green light at a time. So effectively, they only really have 8 lanes. And of course, there's all kinds of traffic problems here. And we were called in to referee which of the 2 streets had to be widened to alleviate the traffic calming, or so the traffic problems. Everyone on this street wanted this street widened, and everyone on this street wanted that street widened. And they've been fighting for like 15 years. And there was a mall here with a parking lot and a couple of businesses with some parking at the back. So within half an hour, we just suggested, well, why don't you do that? And now you got your 12 lane, and you could feel the air leave the room. Like, we've been fighting for 15 years. We could have just done that. There's lots of ways to get back and forth between the 2 streets. They didn't have to crisscross here. Yeah, the property had to be bought, but compared to buying all the property to make an 8-lane road, all the backyards, all the businesses, all the parking, it was a bargain. So from a property acquisition perspective, we're really far ahead. The thing is, they didn't need 12 lanes, so we put the parking back on, and so it's only 10 lanes. So the cool part of this is that the car carrying capacity went from 8 to 10, so 25% increase, and we narrowed 2 out of the 3 streets. So when you find a confluence, if you can remove it, you get a lot of more bang for your buck, because your confluences are forcing you to build roads that are way too wide, unnecessarily wide, just because you make all the traffic meet at these intersections when they don't have to. So these come in all kinds of disguises. So this is what we call the crisscross. This is the shared link. This is what's called the New Jersey traffic circle. This is the loop. And this is what we call the grapevine. And you've got these 3 at least in your area, which we'll point out in a moment. And there's ways to solve all of them depending on the context. I'll just show you one. This happens to be in New Jersey. That's at one of those old New Jersey traffic circles. And this is Highway 202 and Highway 31 coming together just outside a little town. Half the economy of the town is around this traffic circle because that's where all the customers want to be. The other half of the economy is actually on the main street in the town. So there's all kinds of crashes, and this is all jammed up every day at peak hour. It's all backed up. So the New Jersey DOT asked us to take a look at it, and they came in with this parallel network. So instead of everything coming to one spot, we have now 1, 2, 3, 4 streets sharing the load. Now before we got there, so this is what it looks like. Another engineering firm took a look at it, and they were going to build this big flyover. And this is what we call solving in place. If you don't address the confluences, you have to handle all this traffic in the one spot. But when it gets too much, you have to create separate or widen or something else. So this was going to damage half the economy of the town. So with our solution of using network, we can actually turn this into a contributing place and a square. And so that became the plan. It also saved millions and millions and millions of dollars that they didn't have to spend on the flyovers and so forth. They're very expensive to build. Saved a ton of taxpayer money and actually benefited the town's businesses and still handled the car loads and created a walkable place. So just no downside for this particular community. So and it even worked better for the cars because this had to be signalized here. This even processed the cars better than the flyover. Just a little bit of, I'm not a planner, but just about the way you think about your land use. Sometimes zoning is done and the streets are at the edges of the zoning. So this zoning is different than that zoning. And that's fine, but when you start thinking about your town center, think about what happens on both sides of the streets. So remember we talked about light facing light? So think about how you handle your land use so that things are compatible across the street. these things can be incompatible. So just think, think about that a little bit. I'm no expert on zoning and so forth, but that's the kind of thing you want in your town center. This is a very important concept for suburban areas that are getting infill, and that's exactly what you have going on. So this is an arbitrary street network, and you see these lines here, those sort of reddish lines. They are what we call A frontages, and so that's a A frontage street, and every second street is one of these A streets, and all the other streets, every other street is a B street. And what we try and do is organize the buildings, and you're already doing form-based code, so this is something that's already in your toolbox, is to organize the fronts on the A streets so that the doors and windows and so forth are here. And so you have a network of highly walkable streets where when you're walking along, you have an engaging environment with the buildings. And so all the servicing and parking and stuff come off the B streets. Now, it doesn't mean there's not no buildings on the B streets. It's just that your walk will be interrupted by driveways and so forth. So over time, as your town center fills in, if it's organized, it will be increasingly walkable with every new building that goes in. If you don't do something like this, what will happen is someone will build a building, and then their neighbor will build something kind of backwards. So you'll be walking along the street, and you'll be passing a dumpster in the parking lot, and another next building. And it gives what we call predictability, so that people can invest in your community and build a nice building, knowing that their neighbor's going to build a nice building with the front door in the right place. So it's usually a good idea to try and organize your developing area along these sort of A and B lines. There's just no money to line every block with A frontage, even in dense downtown city, but particularly not in more a lower density town center like you'd envision. So just a quick recap on walkability. So there's 3 ingredients that every walkable environment needs, whether it's a park or a city. People have to be comfortable walking so they feel at ease with their environment. So this talks about scale, it talks about natural surveillance, feeling like you're not alone, that kind of thing. Engaging, does it sustain your interest as you walk? We heard from a lot of people they want to walk more. And so if we can make the place engaging through A and B streets and that kind of thing, you will be able to walk further and you'll enjoy it more. Accessible, can you actually physically use it? And then, so that applies to anything, whether it's a park or a downtown or a village, wherever. But in centers, there's 2 more things. That's not enough. In centers, you want a convenient environment so that there's a mix of land uses, so there's things you can actually walk to. If there's nothing to go to, you're not going to walk. So you want to go to parks or groceries or a theater or whatever might be in your town center. And then connected, and this is what we're spending a lot of time on, is the street network. How does it all connect together? So with those 5 ingredients, you can actually get a very highly walkable place. And the magic is, how do you apply those to your context? So let's get into that. This is the first of the study areas. Now it's not exactly north-south. So I think north is that way. There's the highway. This is the grocery store. There's Target, I think. Does everybody know where we are?
Yes.
This is where the 25-story Kroger store is going. Just kidding. Just kidding. So let's look at some confluences. So that's a confluence. That's the grapevine, if you recall from the theory. There's another grapevine. This is the crisscross. There's 2 of them. These 2 streets cross twice, like a DNA molecule. They cross up here, they cross down there. Had they been parallel, things would be a whole lot easier today. But so grapevine plus crisscross. And then the biggest confluence, of course, which a number of you pointed out, was the highway. Like everything has to go across that bridge. So that's a tough one. We have a little more flexibility with the other streets. Now, I haven't actually seen this presentation yet because we just literally put it together. So I'm hoping the next slide is of this area. And pretend for a second, so this is one of those crisscrosses. That one has development on all sides. This one doesn't, so we have a little more flexibility here. So let's pretend you could take a pair of scissors and cut those two streets and pull them apart so they're not crisscrossing. So that if you're coming down this street, you can use one of the streets. Maybe if you're coming up here, you can use the other one. So you have two intersections processing what now one processes. So it'll make it a lot easier to get around. Oh, good. So there it is. So that undoes one confluence. Now there's a whole lot going on in this drawing. So let's start with the south, because this is what a lot of the energy in the room was the last couple of days. Was about the adjacency with these homes. So what we have here is a liner of similarly scaled homes, so about the same height.
Just put street names on a few of the streets.
Narrower, so we can actually get more homes in, but in this idea, they're 2 stories, denser, but a little further, backyard's a little bigger. So that creates a nice buffer to everything around it. On this side, the characteristic of this area is there's a set of berms that come down, so they just keep going down. And then there's a wetland kind of thing. There's a stream. So we thought we would look at the stream, and it goes up like that. So there's a little linear park with a large park at the bottom. And whenever you have a park, we consider that an A space, and we always like to frame it with buildings. So we frame the north or the east side of the park with these buildings, and then along up towards the target. So these are what we call A streets. And then this would be a B street, so if you had to access parking, that's where you access it from. So we made a little connection to the neighborhood where the wetland goes through. You can walk up into the park, and then you can go up one of these B streets, and you're not walking past parking lots. You can get up to the target. Now, there's already an effort to create a connection between the grocery store and over here. So that, in our minds, made a good place for another A street. So you can imagine buildings lining here over time. And this is already happening. There's buildings starting to frame the arterial right here. I should get the old name. That's Ann Arbor Silking along here. And then for your house, right here, we didn't monkey with your house, but we put in this little small driveway so you can connect and turn left.
So does that mean you're moving my house out of commercial? So I can't have a business?
So you can do a business here if you like, but your customers can now get a turn left. So
So does that run along my property?
it runs on the other side of your property line, on this person's property. So the idea was that if you were to ever change anything in your house, you could turn right and out of your driveway fairly easily. But if you wanted to access a signal, you can do it through the network. So the other thing that's here is down here on, I think it's called Sample, Maple. Thank you. It goes someplace and there's a big right of way, and so we're thinking of some kind of trail, some sort of bike trail that could come up, go along the berm up here, which actually goes someplace, and it could come into the park system, and then perhaps down here, and if you felt like you could do bike facilities serving the neighborhood. So you have a connected bike system that connects the region to your neighborhoods and to your center. So that might be a layer of convenience you could provide for cycling. And these sorts of facilities are appealing to a pretty good population of cyclists. Most cyclists in the United States have to be survivors, since someone could be on the street. This is actually comfortable for kids and so on, going to school or ice cream stores or what have you.
So can I ask a question? Because I understood that in order to have a road off of the NRC road from the road commission, that it would have to cut through my property. Are you saying that one property doesn't need to go over? Is that?
Yeah, they're probably talking about if you wanted a signal or a left turn, if we're right in, right out kind of thing. I don't. It's just like your driveway, but it gives you access to this one. I don't know if you have $500,000 to spend on a traffic signal, but this kind of thing I think makes more sense for this context to provide access to a signal. So
Right, I was just focused on the corner.
yeah, there isn't if you wanted a big intersection.
But you're saying it's a small
But
road.
a driveway, that would be fine. Yeah, they're right about that, and we'll get into it, but you can see that where the signals are going, there's a regular spacing, and to get that same spacing would be like right here in your property.
So if we wanted to go with the corner, would there just be another red box on the other side of the road?
Yeah, you would just extend it.
This sketch will be posted on the township website, is that correct?
The presentation will be, and will you give us a copy of this?
Yeah, we'll give you all the JPEG, all the files, and the PowerPoint, so you'll have access to all of them.
So it'll be both posted independently as well as as part of
These are show
Yeah, at the moment, the ink is still drying on this drawing, so we haven't had time to make anything three dimensional.
the example, it's not here. It's like I said where is our what look like here and what look like here.
Okay.
So that's pond. I think it's pond. I don't like this block here.
That's a trail. That's a walking trail.
Yeah, walk trail. I don't think it's safe.
Well, if you don't want to connect, you don't have to connect to the park if you don't want to. That's up to you. I just thought it was a good idea. But you can talk about that on your own.
This is my side. You will destroy that. Yeah.
Okay, then don't do it. That's up to you. So, yeah.
How does the water flow? Because if you put property up, the water actually flows. This is the wetland. The water actually flows this way.
Yeah, I tried to get the alignment based on the aerial. I might have got it off, but you could pretend this is over further. This is just a concept. In fact, I probably made lots of mistakes like that. But we did the best we could in short time with aerials, and we didn't have time to go out and actually survey where the water went. But wherever it does go, you either move this or alter the flow, or some combination.
So I do have a question. How does this, it's a real issue for myself and the folks at Heritage Falls pull out and make a left-hand turn. This does nothing to alleviate the south traffic coming community in our core and community out.
Well, let's get to that in a minute, because I think there'll be a little more clarity on community traffic and on.
I really like the idea that we have houses exactly behind our line, that I call the township or the family, because I have privacy, and I like very much we have a park, so my opinion, I'm very happy. That I exist all the time, I want privacy, because of the houses, because everything I do, that's my happy, it's my very
Right. And we haven't even seen the rest of it yet.
I'm happy houses, but I want to be sure that we do houses that will stay like us in behind our.
Okay, let me just-
Let's finish the
Okay, let me
presentation, I appreciate
clarify.
the concept, and let's finish, because I know, yes, so you have more.
I probably, if I were developing this, I wouldn't duplicate your homes, but I would duplicate them in height. But I think to make it pencil out financially, there might be more
Not
more
in
homes.
Canada, Toronto, and also one, yes?
Yeah, there'll be skinny skinnier, maybe a little deeper.
But it would be low cost houses or about
Yeah, I'm not the market guy.
Yeah.
Anybody's gonna move in here though, I don't think, I think this property's probably too expensive, for a lot of, low cost houses. It might be and the densities will probably go up as you move away from the community. And there's probably places, if you're going to mix in some affordable units, that's probably where you would do it.
The red rectangles are all businesses?
The red means that's just where you want to front with buildings. So I don't know what the buildings would look like or how tall or what have you. It's just that I just wanted to use that to indicate the A streets.
And so is my property being used as a buffer between Heritage Falls and commercial?
No, I just didn't want to presume anything on your property. But you could do it a red in here and then parking come in here if you want. But but we buffered you from this in case you wanted to stay residential. So, okay, let's keep going.
So,
Okay.
the house behind, behind the park between the neighborhood and current neighborhood, yeah, this house, we propose like one row of house or like several houses.
One road,
One.
and then there's a little street,
Okay.
and then there's a park, just like the drive.
One.
That's why I showed the drive before.
There's a store or commercial, what type of hall?
Houses.
Halls, right? It's a hall.
Just have, oh, the red. It- Yeah, that's housing.
Yeah.
This is probably going to be housing because this is kind of far away from the heart, so I would guess that would be mostly housing. There might be a bit of office or something on the bigger street, but I'm thinking it's mostly housing.
That's town hall, right? It's a store.
I have no idea. It's going to be different. It'll be probably different than the insulator.
Hall height is 3.
Something compatible, but I'm going to leave that to your highly competent planning staff. Yeah, let's do that. But I think we're on the right track according to the mood of the group here. We can get into the nitty gritty after if you like. So we tried to extend the same sort of thinking further along. So you see that there's the same buffer here. This is already fronted by businesses, so that makes sense to kind of have it at the A Street. This is the connection that's being proposed to this new development going on. Right now, when it gets first built, this driveway, folks can go around in order to get to the interchange. And if this end unit were to redevelop, we would suggest connecting these two streets for all the reasons we went through earlier about connections. And again, that's the A Street. This is the B Street for both the all these houses back, and here the businesses are back, and it's lined with a berm buffer. And then what we were trying to do is to create kind of some bookends, if you will, and create some open space where you can eat and everything like you were saying you wanted to do. And so we proposed a square here, and it's probably a good idea not to have every park exactly the same, so different functions can have different places. This would probably be a little more intense than down here, and so this would probably be more of a hardscape where you would have, public events and concerts and the sorts of things that you probably wouldn't want to do, so close to the housing. So that's kind of a square, and of course, just like a park, a square has a frontage around it. This is actually a fairly nice looking wetland and pond. And so we were trying to use that as a nice address for the A Streets to engage that A Street and create some, maybe some views to look into it. Right now it's kind of hidden, which is kind of a shame. Could be quite a nice feature as you come across. So, so that's kind of the idea. And a lot of this would have to happen as things redevelop, obviously. Some of it can happen now. Where things like this will probably happen early. This is right now a greenfield, so that could probably happen earlier. Some of the other parts would happen later with redevelopment. But the idea is that planning is all about thinking about the whole thing now, so when things change, you have a plan to go to. And then down here, this is where there's, I think, a very legitimate concern that folks are going to use this street to commute on, and people do it already. We have lots of people tell us they did. So what we're suggesting is to do some traffic calming on that street. And so we have some entry features at the end, so that if people do drive into the neighborhood, they know they're in a neighborhood. Then we have a few traffic calming measures. And the key for traffic calming measures is the spacing. So you want to space things to keep the speeds down. So if you space them at every 7,500 yards, you can get speeds around 20 miles an hour. So we proposed 3 speed humps and 3 mini circles, and I'll show you what those look like in a second, and then the entry features. So that's what a mini circle looks like. So you don't actually adjust the curves, the existing curves. You scale the mini circle, to the width of the streets and the radius, and you put them in, and it requires drivers to go around them. They're sized so that a fire truck and a school bus and everything can go around, but a motorist just can't speed down the road. And this is called a speed hump with an H. They're about 3.5, 4 inches high, about 12 feet wide. Now a bump with a B is the same height but only 18 inches. These are far more effective than bumps, because you can go over a bump and your suspension will react. If you go too quickly over a speed hump, while the front of your car is going down, the back is going up, and it gets really uncomfortable if you speed over them. So they're highly effective. There's all kinds of different ways of marking them.
We actually have speed humps in the neighborhood that I live in, and we moved there recently, and the first couple of times I drove over them, my husband got really mad at me because I was bouncing it around. We hadn't really figured out what the speed you could go, and then he was driving and he figured out that we really did need to slow down.
Yeah,
So it wasn't me, it was the hump.
So this is in Toronto, and I just show this because you can plow them, you can ride your bike over them. And these are so effective that drivers were using the sidewalks because they're faster than the street. And so these posts were put up to stop the drivers driving on the sidewalks. So they are effective. And then the other thing we'd encourage you to do from a traffic calming perspective is to create a sense of enclosure. Right now there's a large openness of like a highway field. Oops. So you can see these 2 streets. They're 30 feet wide, curb to curb, both streets, but this one, people want to go slower than on that one just because of the trees. Same age of homes, about the same setbacks, but the trees make all the difference. And then some kind of entry features at the end, maybe not so bold as these ones, but clearly when you drive into this neighborhood, you know you're in a neighborhood, right? And they come in all kinds of styles. These are really inexpensive ones for this neighborhood. These are just little, I don't know what you call them, but little columns that you put on the side.
But you need to have
Yeah. And then this is what I think would be appropriate for your community. Actually, this is in Chinatown, but it's really important when to let people know you're in a special place, and that behaviors are different, and you have to expect. There's different expectations when you go into a place and they mark their territory. So figure out amongst yourselves what's appropriate for your context, and design something and make it fun. Get people involved. So that would help reduce the cut-through traffic, and those folks who do go through, at least go through on your terms, and I won't bother you. And you'll notice a little feature here. We did a roundabout. That'll become important, a little more important in a moment. But notice how it doesn't line up with the center of the street. It's actually pulled into the berm on the east side. First of all, that's to not disturb the neighbors. But second of all, you don't have to line up a roundabout like you just signal. You can actually move them around a little bit. So this will help make it more attractive for motorists to go up here, and you'll see why that's important in a moment. And then on the other side of Ann Arbor Saline, this is already starting with the A frontage on their arterial. This is beginning now. There's a sidewalk getting built So you can imagine that happening in the future. There's a, what's up there, Best Buy, Kohl's, the other thing. So if that were to connect, it would make sense that if you were to front the street to make it walkable, you could walk up there. You know, continuing from the square to the kind of environmental area up to a second part, or sorry, a third part up here. And so as this redevelops, this is self-storage. As that redevelops, there's already, if you look down, this is almost a park now. You have, and there's that kind of wasted space with that curve. You know, if that were moved over, you could actually have a pretty nice park up there, and create a whole system. So now, when you step back, you see, you see open space and parks and fairly good spacings. So if the land uses were to mix, you would be within what, a block and a half or two of the nearest park, anywhere you live or work here.
I just had a question. Where you have your hotel is where I live. One side of our condo complex is on one side of the hotel. I happen to live in your drawing on the right-hand side. We have found that our children cannot cross the street to get to the pool on the other side because of Old Valley. I mean, it's dangerous. I mean, the kids get out of house. Would that be a good place for one of those multi things?
There's two answers to the question. The first one I'll go into a little more depth in a moment. But right now, there's only two intersections processing all the traffic from both sides. And so everything basically is coming up here, creating a barrier effect. And with more connections, the idea is that some of this traffic won't have to use this street anymore. Because of the constraints up there, it's a bit difficult to untie that confluence up there. However, this is a bike trail. We didn't think about connecting across here, but maybe you could do.
Unfortunately, on one side of the complex and on one side of the street.
But if we had more time, we would probably try and conceive of a bike plan later for this. We have a bit of one that I showed you earlier, but you might want to have some kind of bike facilities come up to the park, that kind of thing, and I don't know if that would access to your swimming pool. It would start to create a more coherent network for cycling.
I was just trying to find something.
Oh, and then
On one side.
yeah, and I think that could be, if it's thought through and if it makes sense, like just part of a bigger system, I think everybody would go with it. Now, with regard to putting humps and things on what we call framework streets, there's two types of, from a traffic calming perspective, there's two types of streets. There's framework streets, like this one, like that one. These all have emergency services role, like those were response routes. And then there's what we call non-framework streets, which just really provide access to homes and that kind of thing. For these sorts of streets, it's appropriate to use what we call retrofit measures, like humps, like mini circles, like chicanes. There's a whole family of traffic calming measures. When you get to framework streets, you can't really use these because you need so many of them. It would drive you crazy. In fact, there's a kind of a rule of thumb, no more than 8 to 12 in a row. And to get the spacing, you would probably need like 50 of them. And you'll end up having them removed, and that's been the practice. Furthermore, the fire department would let you do it anyway. So on framework streets, the way you slow traffic down is looking at lane width, number of lanes, the edge treatments, the sense of enclosure, the views. And this has been designed, with the berms and stuff. It has like a highway vocabulary to it. It's very straight and fast. So if you wanted to self-enforce lower speeds through design, over time you have to alter that. Next time it gets paved or whatever, maybe revisit its design.
Because I know the question of how the road condition is spoken about, the village possibly, and they would fix. Reduce roads on Old Valley. Look, that's great, but it's probably going to just make
So if you're interested in lower speeds, which tend to make a safer, more walkable environment, think about those cross-section changes, lane widths, edge treatments, system enclosure, views. And if it doesn't change much, then you're limited to trying to cross to other parallel facilities like we're proposing with the bike trail. So you might change some intersections so you can actually cross the street.
Yeah, but it still doesn't get us from one side.
No, it doesn't. Yeah, when you say light, you mean traffic signal, I think. Yeah, traffic signals have a set of criteria that have to be met before they're put in. So you have to meet those criteria. And if you do, then you can get a traffic signal. There's different types of walk signals too that you could look at, that the county could look at. So, if you explore that and put it in the right spot. So then, so notice that there's a bit of peculiarity here, and another one in here. We want to, we're working in a few places around the country to relieve these sorts of confluences. Town centers are about network. Highways are about not network. They're about denying access. And so it's kind of like an oil and water kind of thing. And a lot of you expressed an issue that all the traffic has to use that, which is not really town center like. And so in places where there are highways going near downtowns or village centers and stuff, we're exploring what we're calling proximate interchange ramps. And that gives some relief to this intersection right here, which is everything has to go through that's associated with the highway. So on this side, it would look like this. So you can do exactly what you're doing now. You can come off the highway and get wherever you're going. You can get on the highway. But you have a choice. When you come off the highway, you don't have to use the arterial. You can come into the town center. And when you want to leave, you don't have to get onto the big arterial to get to the highway. You can get on here. You can get to it from the arterial, but you don't have to. So it gives you a couple of choices. And over time, when this place develops further, this road will get busier and busier and busier, and the appetite for this kind of thing will increase. So what our suggestion is just don't preclude this kind of thing from happening when you develop, because you'll probably need it in 5, 10, 15 years. And then on the other side, same sort of thing. The network is designed so that it can be simply retrofitted, so you can go to the big arterial and then get onto the highway. You can still do that, or you can get there from the town center. So it gives you choices, and it's again spreads the load. So right now we've got 2 ways to go east-west, and with this you'll have 5. And then right now you've got 1 way to get to the highway, and this way you have 3, depending where you're going. So again, it kind of spreads the load and lets each street be a little simpler design for walking and cycling. Yeah, that's a good question. So paying for something, good planning actually is more affordable than bad planning. If you continue with your current network, the solutions to traffic problems get incredibly expensive because they have to buy a ton of private property to widen these roads, all at public expense, all at taxpayers' expense. With a plan like this, as things redevelop, you add the network, and that cost is mostly borne by the private sector in terms of development. So there's, if you're interested in affordability and reducing your tax burden, a connected network is more affordable than the sparse hierarchy. There are other costs too, like identity. What is the value of identity if it develops like everywhere USA, where everything's on one road? And you've seen those places where it's all about the arterial and there's no community. So that kind of lowers the value and the quality of life of the whole area. So there's more cost to just the physical construction, which I think is cheaper with something like this. This is actually more valuable in lots of different ways. Crash rates will probably be less. The value of these homes and businesses would be higher. More people would probably want to visit these places and eat and shop, whatever they do, whatever happens. So it's a pretty good planning is usually very cost effective.
Mine somewhere else, holes, exports.
Yeah, that's a good question. So we designed the street network so that all the existing buildings can stay where they are. You notice that we avoided even these 4 out parcels. We had to rearrange their parking a little bit, but we didn't knock down the buildings. This creates an address for the grocery store. Now, if your store were to change, you've already got the framework for whatever replaces it. They all stay the same. This just shows that that's the front of the stores. But if it were to change, then you know where the fronts should be. So what we try to do is even here, there's a bit of an exception here. This building would need to be replaced to make that connection. But we tried to minimize those as much as we could to work with the existing buildings.
Over on the door, this,
I don't know who he is.
that's over at that shopping center, I don't know.
Oh, okay.
After, all that.
I think he likes these sorts of concepts, but he hasn't seen this drawing because we did it at like midnight last night. But I think these sorts of things, this actually has a lot of access to his property, and it actually achieves his goal of relieving this road more than, right now, his idea is like that because this building's in the way. But if we think ahead a little bit, it's not a big leap to make this connection. And that's something that the community can put in their plan.
Over, I think it was but some people, I see people who modify like sidewalk. That's we want always we don't want it's small. We want to keep that's one part. That's small. They want to keep. They want change. Inside of there's a subdivision. There's one outline. There's no. You need
Here.
you know you have some here, here. The road you want to try or
No, I was just trying to show you where the street was.
Okay.
Okay. The only thing we're proposing on these streets are these little traffic monumentals and the trees.
you want to reduce the traffic.
Yeah, that's just right of our drawing.
But I don't want people, that road to store.
Yeah, we got that. That's why we did this. So let's look at the other site.
Can I have a question?
Oh, sure.
Maybe, sorry, I have a question. What percentage of the guarantee will happen? What is your?
Actually, why don't we talk about that after? Try and look. So these are ideas. At some point, we want to memorialize this and codify it and so on. There's a whole process. This is just the start of the discussion. And we don't even know if these are good ideas yet. We're just getting some feedback right now. So we're right at the start.
Let them finish and then I'll close it out and I'll have a question.
So let's talk about the other. So I understand we only have like, what, 2 hours left?
You guys have.
So north is up on this one. There's the airport, obviously. This has been redeveloped to a Costco, just to orient everybody. Does everyone know where we are? Okay. So I'm not going to go through all the same stages I did for the previous one, because this is a lot more straightforward, because the block structure is a little more rectilinear. There's not the same adjacencies that we had before, and the same level of concern about scale and so on. And so we didn't want it to be as prescriptive here as we were in the previous study, because there's no one right answer here. There's lots of opportunities here, and so what we did think was good, that there's a boulevard getting built. Half of it's done already, and we thought it would be a pretty good idea to extend it to this kind of open space that's already existing. And And if people wanted to extend this idea, it wouldn't be a stretch to think about it continuing all the way over the neighborhood so they could come in and use the space. Again, in keeping with the whole creating addresses and A&Bs, we surrounded this potential park with A space, and we put a 12-screen movie theater right here with the right popcorn and everything. So we don't know what it will be, but the idea is that it's to be something cool at the end and anchoring. And then the other parts of this is there's some logical places for network, and we just showed a sample of them. East, west, north, south. Like at the end of this cul-de-sac, this is begging to get extended to here. Right now, this line, nothing crosses that line, so everything has to use this street and go to the roundabout. You have a classic confluence. And so by connecting here and here, this kind of State Street roundabout would be really benefit. And then similarly, we can connect over to, this has been here for, this is the 60s. We connect over here. Again, we don't go through anyone's buildings, but we try and stick to property lines and parking lots to make these connections. And then we have a big green field here, and if the pattern of development keeps going the way it has been going, it's not going to be too long before something is here. And so now's the time to start thinking about making some connections. I don't know if these are the right ones, but some north-south, maybe a couple of east and west connections would make a lot of sense.
Are you allowed to move there?
Yeah, you're allowed to build here. The issue with airports is the noise and safety and heights and things like that. And there's these things called noise contours, and depending on how far you are away, you can do different things. So you could do storage, and you see a lot of golf courses being runways, that kind of thing. So you can do stuff here. It just has another set of rules that apply. But you can certainly do stuff here and here, and you want to connect. What else did we do? Oh yeah, we did suggest connecting the backs of these buildings together so that everything has to come out to the street. You could go from parking lot perhaps with loading and what have you over time. Again, that
How
would
would you do this, make a connection?
yeah, that would be through
Like
if
an
you,
expressway.
yeah. If, for example, your shop, if you wanted to connect to your
When
neighborhood.
you touch the expressway,
Yeah, this is on your property, it's not on the expressway.
it's
But
not
it's,
safe back there.
it's just so a delivery could go from place to place without having to use the street.
So take it all the way along the
Oh, you
highway.
could- you-
Never all the way along.
Yeah, you could do something on that. That would be a little more intrusive, but you could do something on
We'll show a golf course.
it. Yeah. I'm not sure it's feasible, but you could look at it. And then we suggested the same sort of thing here. You don't have to do this, but it would allow another choice for everyone working here. If they're taking those movements on the highway, they could get to and from the highway without having to use State Street, which is under a lot of pressure.
You didn't suggest any more overpasses or anything over on
No. No, we kind of stuck with kind of low cost, low scale kind of change.
Okay, I think there's much along the south side of my
This connection I think would help a lot. That's a whole other ball of wax trying to get a frontage road in. But it doesn't mean you should look at it. That's a kind of a big scale. So we didn't focus a lot on that one. So that's it. So thank you very much, everybody. Thank you for all your time.
Thank you all for coming. I'm just going to close it here. As Ian was talking, there's a couple of points that came to my mind, and I'm going to try to make three of them. The first one is, if nothing else, I hope what we take away from here for the last 2 days is what we can get if we plan together. Planning in partnership is the way I like to term it. We are visioning this is our community, and I hope that we can continue this process down the road. I think we kick-started that for the first time in the township back in 2009. That was the first phase. It's going to be a continual process as we see things change at the ground level. We're doing it now, and I hope that we continue to do it because things are fluid, market forces are fluid, things change over time. What I want you to take away from here is what we can achieve together when we get together and plan in partnership. So thank you for your participation, for making your voices heard, for the feedback, so we can come up with these sort of visions for the future. Which brings me to my second point. What this is really please keep in mind, it's a vision. It's a concept plan that's being set. It's a vision for the future. We don't know when this vision is going to materialize. Is it going to materialize in 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years? We don't know. What we're trying to do here is plan and create and set forth a vision for the community so that we can move in that direction. When and how and exactly the specifics of, is it a Starbucks, is it this, is it that, we don't know what that's going to look like. It's going to be a function of as things move forward and maybe 5, 10, 15, 20 years. Especially when you talk about the road commission, DOT, those sort of things, these things take time. But we have a framework here, at least something to begin working on. Which brings me then to my third and final point, which is that we have been working on some of these things, and we have been creating some of these bones. What Ian had by way of the bike lanes, we have, in 2011, put a bike lane on Gable. We put a sidewalk now over in our Salida, the east side, which the township paid for. So those bones are starting to sort of pop up in places. These nodes in the rest of the township across the board. So as these bones sort of start to pop up in various places, the hope is that we start connecting them through a period of time as things change in the landscape and stuff. On the more sort of document side and official side of things, we know that I think I mentioned it a couple of days ago, but we have obviously been working on the revision for the CO as well. The specifics with regard to the form-based nodes that you all are sort of very familiar with as well. We've made a number of changes, including increasing the buffering, reducing the height restrictions, those sort of things. It's going for another public hearing to the Planning Commission on October 2nd. And so those sort of changes are moving along as well, because like I've said, the master plan zoning is all reading documents. We are going to make sure that they're reflective of the sort of stuff that we want to do in the township and accommodate and provide us with the tools that we need to put these visions into place. So that's all I had, my 3 points. If there's additional questions, I want to make sure first I'm respectful of your time, because I know you have a plan to catch, so do you have any time constraints as you want?
We've been hanging around for a bit.
Okay.
Is there anybody we should be contacting, like the road commission, or as people sitting?
Yeah.
Is there any way we can?
That's a good point, and actually,
easier to.
yeah, absolutely, and that's a good point. We actually had the two, the executive director and whoever else was here yesterday. I had requested them to come to meet with Ian and Hannah to make sure that as they were putting some of these visions in place, that we engaged with the road commission as well. Obviously, as you know, they have very specific rules and regulations in terms of how they do business. For example, the speed humps that Ian showed you, the board approved in 2013 a new policy where they're setting aside $100,000 each year from a general fund to put into place traffic calming measures throughout the township. So that's a new program that we put into place. So we do have speed humps in some of our neighborhoods now in the township, but again, we have to go with the requirements per the road commission. So that will be something we will continually make sure that they're at the table.
So that
Right.
people from one half of our.
And I think it was really nice for them to be here yesterday as well, so they continue to sort of, because that's a dialogue I've really been starting with them for many years, but it's really, I think, so they know that we as the township are coming to the table, not wanting to look at developments in a bubble, but really how they correlate to the existing land uses, so that when they suggest any changes to traffic lights or whatever they do, that they're also taking a look at it from a more macro and comprehensive perspective, which they may not do.
Because I know how long it took to get just a stoplight.
Yeah.
more in the valley.
Yeah.
I mean, if I want to flash in Lansing and pick up from one side of our complex, I may as well start tomorrow
Yeah.
to get it 3 years from now.
To while we're on the subject, I'll just add that the road commission was really open to what we were doing. They like the problem, they see it benefiting their own interest. And we talked about if there was a consensus between the township, the community, the development community, and the road commission, when you go to the State Department of Transportation, you're in a much stronger position. So I think I feel encouraged by what happened at our meeting tonight.
Thank you.
Before, the buffer zone was 50 feet. After, I don't know what happened, started to reduce the buffer zone. And now it's an increase. Did you increase at 50 feet, how it was before, you are committed, you changed. Actually, you were very happy before because the plan here is not fine, it can change the set. I want the buffer zone to be exactly how it was before, 50 feet. And I would be very happy, and I would be, because I want to have privacy. You said that you increase, but you increase at 50 feet. So can we
Candice,
change?
do you remember off the top, Candice or Ben, do you remember what the buffering that is being recommended through the revisions in
So it's
Article
based,
5?
it's based on the height of the building. So it's.
But before you have 50 feet, why you change the buffer? I understand you change the zoning, why you change the buffer zone?
So
It was
tell you what,
50
why don't
feet.
you guys talk about the buffer after?
Yeah, good. And I was just going to say, we'll bring out the document so we can actually walk you through sort of what is being recommended and you will be satisfied.
Yeah, because there are some values that it's possible to change, and I want to be sure.
Right, that's-
that the buffer zone at least 50 feet.
Got it.
We'll
Yeah.
go through the stuff with you afterwards. We'll bring out the document. Yes, sir, and then you.
You got a juice number of these for us, the updated one?
Oh, so it's going to, do you mean what you presented today?
Yes.
Is that your question? So you will be providing us with JPEGs or whatever?
Yeah, we literally just
Yeah.
finished it before we came, like, when you were sitting down, we were still finishing it, so we'll copy those files on a jump drive and get.
Okay.
so that-
And so it'll be on our website, but if you want hard copies, please let us know. Yeah, absolutely.
Looks like the good plan to me. I appreciate that. I'm more interested to know the detail of this plan, especially around the very building. I don't, you know what that will be, but at least can you tell what the height?
Yeah, with regard to that kind of thing,
When-
I was just trying to get the relationship, so I haven't even thought about that sort of thing. But I think we all agreed on a theory about stepping up as things go in so that they're compatible.
Well,
But I don't-
based on these files we had yesterday, we're talking about the piece of land, the beautiful parking range. Based on the cost of that piece of land, looks like you have to build up 6 floors, you know.
Again,
it's about money.
we're just
Why don't-
speculating.
Right, and I think we built in some language into our zoning requirements. Obviously, that's not going to allow for stories to go
He
back.
said that, builder last
Yeah.
time, he said it's around 60
The developers and private developers, as you know, will say many different things. We have laws
He
and
said it's
regulations
allowed
and
by,
ordinance.
he said it's allowed
Please,
by.
we have a planning staff and they'll be here to walk you through the document if you're interested in knowing sort of what is going to be allowed or not allowed or whatever. And if you have any feedback to that, please make sure you give that to them as well. And like I said, there's a public hearing on that as well on October 2nd.
Well, it looks like that's the financial dream in this kind of thing. Look at the future, you will,
That's it, but this is a different meeting, so, the heights and the setbacks and stuff sound like you've got to get the books out.
Right, so we'll take out the books and we're happy to
Anything more
be
about
here.
what we talked about though?
Yeah. Any additional questions or comments? Yes.
So you want to create a lot more connected streets, but at some point, they're going to put gridlock with a lot of the streets of New York City, and we're one block, going to split off to the next block.
You know, it's actually the opposite. The cities with the fewest streets and the biggest blocks have the most gridlock. Because imagine just 2 streets east-west and 2 streets north-south. You've got 4 intersections and 4 places, let's say, to turn left going north. Now, just imagine 2 more streets, now you have 9 intersections to turn left. So you've got more than double the ways to turn left. And when if anyone's turning left, you know you have to wait for a gap in traffic. So when the gap comes along, you can turn into it. With that extra street, you can use that gap again. And so New York City would be completely gridlocked if you took out every second street. Some of those blocks in New York City are actually quite long, and I think if they were to redo it today, it wouldn't be. So there's a networks breathe when you have a very sparse network. That's when you concentrate too much on too few intersections and it chokes up. So it's not just walkable; it actually helps the traffic too.
It's easy to agree with you that good planning is cheaper than bad planning. However, I think you minimize the threshold that you have to cross to get the initial funding to make sure that the network that's crucial to your concepts are in place. Have you experienced, do you have experience with funding these kind of developments?
Well, let me give you an example. In north of DC, in North Bethesda, there's a large area like yours, but way bigger. And they have been trying to widen their way out of congestion for a long time. They had a no network that was shopping mall and so forth. And they simply cannot afford to keep doing that. It's just too expensive.
Sure.
And so we worked with a much larger group of property owners and stakeholders and superimposed a new network, much bigger than this. But which now the county government there couldn't afford to do anything. The state DOT wasn't helping out. It was just unaffordable. But the developers who wanted to change some of those land uses said, we'll pay for the streets. It's way cheaper for us to pay for the streets than not pay for them and wait for the never end, for taxpayers to pay for it. So
I know that's your thesis.
Well, that's actually reality there, and I can give you some other examples, but be skeptical though. I know you're skeptical of what we're showing you, and watch the process and keep people prepared. You need to be skeptical on buffers, and you need to be skeptical on heights, and how the money works. And all we can do is share our experiences with you, and you can believe us or not, but usually when we give everybody the same information, smart people come to the same conclusion. But when it's new, you have to test it, and don't take our word for it. Look around. I gave you a couple examples, but the more I think research you do on this, I think the more you'll see that that this is actually a pretty affordable way to go. The alternative is not doing what we're talking about, and then who pays for that? What does that cost? And so now you're talking some mega dollars. So not doing it is very expensive. At least we know that. But I actually want everyone to be a little bit skeptical on everything we've been talking about. Keep everyone's feet to the fire, stay engaged, ask questions, and again, keep sharing your opinions, because that's the only way this works.
I couldn't agree more. I think Ian is absolutely right. And I think I am a planner, you know that. As planners, we come to the table with our visions, and it's important that we sort of get that feedback from folks like you to sort of begin, and you said, keep our feet to the fire and make sure that we're getting it right. And sometimes we won't get it right, and then how do we go back and get it right, and all those sort of things. So it's very, very critical that we continue to have dialogues like this. So if there's no other questions on the larger presentation, yes.
So now we have this right? Everybody seems like smiling. How much we can opt into like zoning ordinance and on this type of thing?
That's a good question. So I think, and again, I encourage you to stay, and Candace, I think, is walking over to bring a copy of the form-based code here, so she'll walk you through exactly what's being proposed with regard to the changes to the zoning ordinance. to allow us to do these sort of things in a better fashion, in a more sort of, but to your point about the master plan as well, I think, so we adopted, it's kind of crazy, but it's been 4 years since we adopted the current master plan, so we will be going through a process next year to sort of go back again and review the master plan in its entirety and refresh it and revamp it, and we're hoping that these sort of things are going to then replace the existing macro concept that we have for the nodes that we're doing the charrettes for. So that's going to be a process that obviously we would like you to continue to engage with us into next year as well. And I may not be related to this, but I'll just let you know that next year what we're also trying to do is, because the Parks and Rec master plan is up for renewal as well in its 5-year cycle, so that is going to be going on as well. So we're really trying to build some synergies into our planning processes so they feed off of one another as well, because we've created in the new master plan and the revised one, I hope as well, a lot of new features like public placemaking and green spaces and gathering spots that have led to initiatives like farmers market and those sort of things that lead into parks and recreation. And of course, as you know, and I think it's something that's very representative of Pittsfield Township, is folks very much value their green spaces, so that would be really nice to make sure that we're sort of really capturing what the priorities for the community are and planning for those into the future as well.
So, next year, the plan is to go over the master plan. Hypothetically, you get a developer that buys it, I don't even know if they're properly so but so hypothetically, you get a buyer, comes in, buys that, controversial piece of property, and they start planning, they come in with a plan, and they want to go this direction. Does the planning commission say, okay, but this is the direction we want to go based on what we saw here, or do we let them go ahead with the current master plan and then retrofit from there?
Okay, again, so I think the site plan submission has to adhere not so much, the master plan informs sort of what the vision is, but the zoning is what dictates what can or cannot be done. So the zoning is in the process of being revamped, and like I said, so we're hoping to revise and re-adopt the entire zoning ordinance in a couple months. So those pieces should be in place before next year. But we would like to go back and relook at the master plan as well and have that more reflective of the sort of things we've been doing in the last few years. Is that, did you ask your question? Yeah, okay.
So you as a township person could stop, could stop somebody from doing something you don't want.
Yes. We can only make sure they adhere to what's in the zoning ordinance. Yeah. Yes.
That's not what's called what the vision is the master plan.
The master plan is a vision, it's a document, it sets out a vision, priorities, things we want to accomplish, initiatives we want to take on.
Maybe I could take a crack at explaining
Please.
in different words.
Please, go ahead.
So what happens is...
Since you're here, I'd like
So what happens typically is when you get some new ideas like this, if we start to get a consensus around it, then they get what do we call them, implemented into the zoning code of the master plan, and then they become the official vision. So there's a bit of a process, which it sounds like you're going through already. And so if there is a consensus around this thing, then these things become official as these processes go forward.
Right, so
Like there's a set form. That's a way to like that. How to remove
I'll say he wants to make a connection, and then you don't like, how should you contest?
Yeah, if we don't have a consensus, then you have to live with what you have right now in terms of zoning and the master plan until you
But he
get...
doesn't want that reflected in the map, that he showed the conceptual map, that he showed.
Oh, the little connection?
Yeah, the little connection. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, we can just erase it.
Okay, yeah. Last time I remember we talked about the tower. Nobody likes tower, but the people don't like that one. Set one. Then the company say that I
No
think.
problem. I'm not married to it. No one's married to it. Yeah, it was my idea, but I said up front, maybe my ideas aren't good ideas, so.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Well, thank you so much for coming and for the conversation, and please stick around. The planners are there with their documents in hand, so question away.